God. Not on my back. So our world is filled with
Part 1. Protect and Survive 1980. Ladies and gentlemen, before we start tonight's performance, we would like your attention for just a few moments.
We want to draw your notice to this very important booklet, Protect and Survive, published by the Central Office for Information, which contains vital instructions for all of us here tonight.
In the event of a nuclear war, this leaflet tells you how to make your home and family as safe as possible.
If nuclear weapons are used on a large scale, those of us living in the rural areas might be exposed to as great a risk as those in the towns.
The radioactive dust falling where the wind blows it will bring the most widespread dangers of all.
No part of the United Kingdom can be considered safe from both the direct effect of the weapons and the resultant fallout.
However, the dangers which you and your family will face in this situation can be reduced if you do as this booklet describes. So read this booklet with care. Keep it safely at hand at all times.
I never expected to see you here again, Ray.
I was walking around the area. For old time's sake, saw the lights were on. So I took a chance and came in. Is this it then, Alison? Is this all that's left of the bookshop?
I'm surprised you still remember it, Ray.
Looks so bare. So cold now. Empty. Kind of gloomy. What have you done with all the books and the leaflets?
Most of them are in my back bedroom.
How have you got them all in there, Alison? It's tiny.
But they're stacked in cardboard boxes. Some of the books I managed to sell. The art centre took a few. But for the last few years I've been selling them mostly online.
This is where the counter was, wasn't it? With that till that never worked properly. And wasn't the notice board just there? What have you done with all the posters, Alison, that used to be on the walls?
I've kept some myself, and I've given others to a few C&D friends who still meet up in Tavistock.
All those years of dedication and you're reduced to this? A basket of odds and ends? Who would have thought it would come to this?
I just have a few legal documents to sign and then it's all finished.
Fine. Well then, you might as well sling this stuff in the bin, lock up and go.
I thought you might want to keep some of this. I kept it for you, Ray.
Why? What's in it?
Some of your things that you left here, photos, books, diaries, and there's the banner you made.
Can't be that important. Lived without them for all these years. I'll put it in the bin in the yard. Must get back to Manchester tonight. Got to catch that last train.
What brought you back to Plymouth then, Ray?
Mum's funeral.
Yes, of course. I was sorry to hear about your mum's death. Did the funeral service go all right?
Yes, as one might expect. Dad didn't turn up, of course, the bastard. Never there when you need him.
She was a real gem, your mum.
Yes, always supported me, whatever happened.
She was always there to help anyone.
Anyway, gotta get going.
What about the scrapbook, Ray? Don't you want to take that?
What scrapbook?
It's here.
Don't think so.
Well, at least have a proper look at it before you throw it away. it here after you decided to leave.
And you kept it all this time?
Well, you know me, I don't like to throw anything away.
Must be 30 years or more.
32 to be precise, Ray. I kept meaning to send it to you, but I didn't know where you were living. You'd left in such a hurry you didn't even leave me your address.
If I remember rightly, I didn't know where I was going to end up. I was just going back to Greenham. After that, I wasn't sure. So you kept the bookshop going all those years? What about Julie? Didn't she move in with you and you ran the bookshop together?
Yes, well, you were never going to do that, were you?
Sorry, but you always knew that wasn't possible. Julie was good for you though, wasn't she? She got you into feminist and gay issues too. You never knew where to pin your colours to before.
We were together until her death in 2012. She helped to keep the bookshop solvent in those early days with her work as a rep at book fairs all over the world. Helsinki, Paris, Amsterdam, even Moscow.
We just lost touch with each other over the years, didn't we?
I thought you might send me your address when you'd found somewhere, but you never did. So I just kept hold of the stuff. And some other things too. A pair of suede boots, some books, and a knitted dress.
I didn't think you'd want to know where I was living or what I was doing after I left. Oh God, Ali! Is this you? And that's me, isn't it? In this school photo.
It is. Top juniors, Millbridge Primary.
I remember now putting this scrapbook together. I used to do it in the evening after I'd put Dominic to bed. I was much more organised in those days.
You've always been organised. You only put on a show of being scatterbrained to try and fool everybody.
Look at this stuff. It's like a time capsule, a snapshot of Plymouth in the 1980s. You could make this into a short story.
No.
A history of the times. There's probably enough material here to make a full-blown novel.
No.
Or a 3-act play.
I don't think so.
Have you seen this newspaper clipping? About the protest on the Tamar Bridge?
Yes.
What was the date of that?
May
1983! A lifetime ago. Isn't that you there in the picture?
Yes, it is. I did start to write something about those times, just for my own sake, but I never got very far with it.
You should try again.
No.
Look, all this about the cruise missile watch, the pupa meetings, ballpoint camp, the die-ins in the city centre, the vigil in Charles Church. You knew about all these things. You can tell them what it really was like to live in a garrison city during the 1980s.
It's all very well for you. You're going to waltz off back to Manchester tonight and I won't hear from you again for, I don't know, decades. Why don't you do it if you think it's such a good idea?
Because you were right at the heart of the whole thing. Everything went through this bookshop. I was only here at the beginning.
Can I help you? Oh, sorry.
I'm looking for the bookshop.
Well, you're too late. It's closed.
I'm from the Evening Herald. My editor told me to write something about all the shops that are closing down in the city. And this shop is one of them.
A pity your boss didn't send you when this place was the thriving hub of the community.
Why weren't you here then to celebrate the excitement and the buzz of one of the few independent bookshops in Plymouth?
But strangely enough, I was here in the bookshop in the 1980s. As soon as I stepped into the deserted shop just now, the memories engulfed me. It still had that distinctive smell of joss sticks, quite exotic it seemed to me as a young lad. The air thick with perfume. So ironically, I was here as a young child when this shop was in its heyday.
It was the only radical bookshop in Plymouth at that time.
We hosted book fairs, poetry festivals, book launches, and we had a thriving children's section.
I remember that. It was over there, wasn't it?
It was, yes. It was a very exciting time. There was a sense that we were participating in living history.
We got a lot of abuse too.
Mainly that we were men-hating feminists.
You see, Plymouth wasn't an easy city to live in if you were left of centre of your politics, culture and sexuality. It was dominated by the military and the dockyard.
What kept me going was my belief in the power of books to change lives. And this conviction still does. A tiny drop of ink can make millions think. I think it was Byron who said that.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah. So, Mr. Journalist, go ahead, write your article, write your story about us and those times.
My mum Sally used to bring me here. She loved this place.
Yes, we remembered Sally. She did lots of voluntary work here, and your dad must be...
John.
Yes.
He joined CND, didn't he?
That's right, and Dad's still a member of C&D. I can picture myself, 8 years old, spread-eagled on the floor in the children's corner, eagerly fingering through the pages of Watership Down. And I've never stopped reading after I found that book here. Dad even bought me a rabbit. And do you know what they called him? Fiver.
I never knew where your mum found the time to be so dedicated to C&D. After all, she was working all hours up at Derriford as a children's nurse.
And she organised the Plymouth support groups to Greenham.
Once they knew who I was, they were more willing for me to write this article. But as I worked on it, I found that I was not writing about the closure of the bookshop, but its early years in the 1980s, when it was such a vital resource for men and women like my mum and dad, who were so concerned about the nuclear threat.
I think I could spend all day in this bookshop, John, just browsing through the books and the leaflets.
And the notice board's a real treasure trove.
Do you think we should join C&D?
I don't know, dear. I'm not so sure.
We need to do something. What's your problem with it?
Well, I'm just thinking, you know, me being the new GP in the city, I don't know what my colleagues would think of me if they knew I was a member of CND.
They can think what they want. I can't live with the anxiety anymore. Do you know I went through the whole of last winter absolutely terrified? Do you not remember?
Yes, I remember. I know last year was a very difficult time for you.
I was sure that every day was going to be our last. I would look around our bungalow and think, which table can I put our son under if there was a nuclear attack? Joining CND is just a small gesture, but important. For me, anyway.
Have you spoken to anyone else about this?
I've spoken to Alison.
Oh,
And she's given me some details about free workshops for women with young children. And there's a small ad on the notice board advertising it. I think I'll go along to one of them. What do you think, John?
I think, thank God for this place.
I think we should still join CND. It would make me feel so much better. Less alone, less scared.
We should bring our son here. There's lots of children's books. It might help him with his reading.
Yes, that's a good idea. But John, can I post that application for CND please today, before we forget?
If you're going to write about this bookshop then, I suggest we get started. You might find something of interest in here.
In that case, if you don't mind, I'll sit over there and take some rough notes.
Yes, please do. I suppose we should start at the beginning.
The beginning? That's a bit predictable, isn't it? Well, isn't there anywhere else we can start?
Well, I mean how the two of us met at Millbridge Primary.
Oh, God, no! That would be totally bloody embarrassing. Anyway, he won't want to know all about that. I thought that this story was about how the bookshop was going to save the world. How we were going to stop those fascist bastards spreading war and nuclear destruction in our city.
It is about that, but he might need a bit of background detail. He needs to understand where we're coming from, our ideals, our hopes, our ambitions. We can't jump in at the deep end straight away.
Of course we can. That's just what I like. Straight in, boom, bash, bosh. Hit 'em where it hurts from the get-go.
I think we need to be a little more circumspect than that.
Circumspect? You can tell which one of us ended up at the posh university, can't you? So circumspect my arse.
That's a bit rich coming from the girl who got 3 A's at A-level.
Yeah, well, they must have had a load of road bookmarkers that year. But it didn't get me anywhere. Look where I ended up. I worked for the DHSS.
All right. Not just about school. I meant how we both got involved in all this protest stuff. How we women linked arms across the Tamar Bridge.
Not me.
Oh,
If you remember rightly,
yes.
I wasn't there on the bridge.
And all that other stuff that you got involved in. That nuclear submarine business, for example.
I'm not ashamed of what I did there.
No.
I would probably do it again if I had to.
I'm sure you would. Do you remember those meetings we attended in the Quaker Meeting House? The pupa meetings?
Pupa.
Plymouth United Peace Action.
Oh yes, I remember now, sitting on the floor at the back of the hall during those meetings. Dad was a bit reluctant at first, being a new GP. He was worried about some of his colleagues might think, but once he got involved with McCanway,
a medical campaign against nuclear weapons.
That's it, that gave him confidence. And of course there was Mum's enthusiasm.
Those pupa meetings were bloody endless talk shop, if I remember. Talk. Talking was all some of them wanted to do. Talk about world peace. Talk about transcendental love, Mother Nature, complementary medicine, alternative therapy, hypnotherapy, yoga, meditation. Everything that was right under their bloody noses, all across this city. The poverty, exploitation, and the potential for nuclear destruction.
Suddenly the room was flooded with noise. Voices of passion, of persuasion, argument and discussion. Voices committed to change, filled with dreams of equality and justice, compassion and peace.
Shush! Sorry. Right, everybody. Should we try to get this pupa meeting started?
Well, I don't think pupa is a very good name.
I don't think our name is that important, as long as we're acting together, working to further the cause of peace. Working together for peace.
Yes.
Well, what about pennies for peace then? That's quite snappy.
That's
isn't it?
No way. We're not giving Ted Pinney any publicity. He's never supported the peace movement.
No, look, what about the suggestion that was made at the last meeting of sending a delegation to Greenham to support the women there? Surely that should be one of our priorities.
Yes, I agree.
Yes,
Yeah, I think
Well,
so.
has anyone read this Protect and Survive pamphlet the government published? It's such nonsense. Do you know what? It advises you to close the curtains if a bomb is dropped on the city.
It also says to bring your pets inside and leave the kids at school because the school will take care of them.
Really?
As if.
Yeah, it says 150,000 people would be killed immediately if a bomb falls on Plymouth.
And the government's telling us to draw our curtains. As if that's going to make any bloody difference.
For me, personally, I think we should be focusing on wages for housework. Putting an end to the government's decisions on exploiting women.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yes.
Look, I agree those issues are important. I'm not denying that. But our title is Plymouth United Peace Action. That's what we should be focusing on, right?
Yes.
Now, we have received a letter from Tavistock Peace Group They're asking us to take part in a communication network,
What does that mean?
a telephone tree they call it,
What's a telephone tree?
operating throughout Devon and Cornwall.
You have to explain it to me. I don't know what you're on about, John.
It's a telephone tree. It's a simple way of organising protests against the movement of missiles at night through the towns and villages of Devon and
Yeah,
Cornwall.
you see, everybody in the tree has a responsibility to
Yes.
phone 3 other people. And when the convoys are on the move, and then those 3 each contact 3 more people, yes? So, yeah.
Yeah,
Go on,
the
John.
idea is to get as many protesters out as possible to line the routes these night times that the convoys are taking, either from the US base at St Morgan or to Ball Point in Plymouth.
Yes, right. Now look, remember, this is non-violent.
Yes,
Yeah,
right.
non-violent.
Yes.
We have agreed not to impede the convoys or disrupt the public services or alienate the general public. It's just placards on the verges of the route. Keep death off our roads. Yes? All agreed?
If
Yes,
you're
go.
willing to be part of this network, leave your phone number with me at the end of the meeting. What about the bookshop? Will you be taking part?
Oh, and the tree, yes. Yes, of course I will, but we should also be campaigning about making public transport safer for women.
Yeah.
You know, you can have that challenge.
No, that's-
Well, my wife's too scared to use the public transport at night. I was have to meet her after work.
Well, I think that must be very frightening for her.
Okay.
Yeah, good on
Look,
you.
can we get back to Greenham? Yeah. What about organising a Plymouth support group to go to Greenham? Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Could we do that? Yes. We could take them food, sleeping bags,
Right.
books, clothes, and we could do the night watch for them,
Oh, I
and then
don't
they
know
could get
about
some
that.
sleep. Yes, they could get some sleep. Yes.
Yeah, because I've got no guitar they can have. I hear they like music up there.
Oh, that's great. Music always brings people together.
I'll bring
I like
somebody.
it.
Yeah, I'm definitely. I'll someplace some just
It was all your fault that we got involved in those pupa meetings. I wouldn't have gone there by myself. I would have been too nervous. But you were a real firebrand in those days.
What do you mean was? I bloody hope I'm still a bit of a loose cannon.
Like at school, when you told Miss Porter, the history teacher, what you thought about Winston Churchill.
What did you just say, Rachel?
It's not Rachel, it's Ray. How many times do I have to tell you lot? Ray! How long have you been trying to teach me this history rubbish and you still don't know my bloody name?
What did you just say? Are you swearing at me, Rachel? Well, what did you just say to me?
I said, when are we going to do some proper history, miss, about the exploitation of the working people over the centuries?
I don't know where you get this claptrap from, Rachel.
The socialist work.
Oh,
You should try it sometime, miss. It might open your eyes to the real history of this city and the fascist government that spreads its insidious propaganda from London.
Oh, disgusting.
Then the next day, she was summoned to go and see the head mistress in her office. And the head mistress said to her,
We all like girls with a bit of spirit.
My dad doesn't. He tells me to shut my gob and get a job in the bank.
Well, I do have a bit of sympathy with your father there, Rachel.
See what I mean? It's not worth wasting my breath on her.
There is a time for a frank exchange of views, Rachel, and there's a time to consider the realities of your future within this highly respected school. Let me remind you that leaving our establishment with a glowing record
As if.
is worth its weight in gold, Rachel. It is nothing less than a guaranteed passport to a secure future and a happy life.
And that was when I walked out of her office. I couldn't take any more of their shite.
And she walked out of the school too.
Well, I had already done my A-levels and there was no way she was going to write me a decent reference. So I thought, I'll do what my dad says for a change. I'll get a job in a bank and forget about saving the world, for a bit anyway. But the banks weren't interested in me, God knows why. So I had to settle for a job in the Department of Health and Social Security, and bloody hell was that an eye-opener. Mountains of bloody paperwork stacked all around you. I've never seen so many bloody forms and paperwork. Oh, I swear they had a form for everything, and it had to be filled in triplicate and then filed away to be lost forever.
She didn't last the month there.
W.H. Smith's wasn't that much better. I was on pens and stationery, and that was when I encountered Creepy Dave, the deputy manager, an all-round creep.
Well, before we go any further, I want to tell you that I object to your word, creepy. I think that's just a feminist slur on my repertoire of interpersonal skills. Creepy makes me sound weird and sleazy, and that's not fair. So, how's it going, Rachel? Getting into the swing of things on it?
Fabulous. Never knew stacking envelopes and writing paper was so much fun. And it's Ray, not Rachel.
Well, do you fancy a drink after work this evening?
I tell you what I do fancy, Dave.
Oh yeah? What's that?
Working in the basement.
Ah, you mean the music department, don't you?
That's more my style. Shuffling through all those LPs, listening to the Sex Pistols, the Adverts, Joy Division.
Oh, country and western's more my kind of thing. I can't stand all your shouting and spitting.
I should have known that he was a complete tosser straight away.
But play your cards right and you never know.
Really?
So, what about a drink after work tonight, Rachel?
Busy, Dave. Sorry.
But I knew I'd get her round to my way of thinking. Eventually.
I was a fool. I should have known that it would end in disaster.
Well, be a good girl and you never know where you'll end up, Rachel.
Up the duff. That's where I ended up. 3 months gone.
Not my fault.
Well, whose fault was it then?
Well, it takes two to tango.
And that just about sums up our relationship. Our brief marriage seemed like one long series of rows.
I never did really understand why she bothered marrying him. A whirlwind romance, the papers would have called it, but there was zero romance as far as I could see. She didn't need him. She could have survived as a single mother. Her mum would have helped her. But underneath that rough, abrasive exterior, there's a little girl seeking security. I always thought that she sold herself short, betrayed the feminist cause, and then regretted it for the rest of her life.
What did you say? You're going to vote for Thatcher? She's not looking out for the working people of this country. Who's looking out for us, the ordinary folk? Certainly not Thatcher.
Well, I think Mrs. Thatcher's ideas are sound. There's nothing wrong with those ideas.
You must be joking. It's Robin Hood in reverse. Robbing the poor to give to the rich.
Well, buying your own council house. What's wrong with that? I would do that if I had the opportunity, instead of paying rent all my life so someone else can get rich.
Private property is theft.
That's a load of bollocks.
Then the birth of their son, Dominic, seemed to create more tension rather than bringing them close together.
You're a bit of a closet fascist, aren't you, Dave?
No, I am not.
I wish you told me all this before we got hitched up together. You lied to me.
But where are you going now?
Out,
Another protest?
perhaps.
Where to this time?
Devonport.
The dockyard?
Why? Are you coming?
Well, you should hear what the lads at work are saying about you mad bitches. Making fools of yourself with all your silly protests. It's time you grew up and accepted responsibility as a wife and a mother.
Listen, you numbskull, I am taking my responsibilities seriously. Britain has Europe's biggest concentration of nuclear weapons, British submarines with Polaris missiles, and American cruise missiles at Greenham.
And that's what keeps this country safe. We need to be able to defend ourselves.
But they're They're all controlled by the Americans, not us. There are more than 150 cruise missiles on British soil. That makes us a prime target in any war. That's why I'm going down to the dockyard. I'm doing this for us and our son.
But the dockyard is the lifeblood of this city. Half my mates work there.
Well, they've got blood on their hands then, haven't they?
Well, what do you want them to do? Give up their jobs? Go on the dole? They've got families to support. Not to mention all the other people who make a living via the dockyard, the shops, the pubs, the garages, the taxis.
You are a sucker for all this vile propaganda the government spews out every day, aren't you? Misleading the public into thinking that nuclear war wouldn't be that bad after all. Do you remember that Protect and Survive film a few years ago? It was absolutely terrifying. If there's a nuclear bomb dropped on this city, we'd all be wiped out in minutes.
But the final straw was when Ray decided to go to Greenham Common.
You're not going to Greenham Common.
I am, and I'm taking my son with me as well.
You're bloody mad. You're poisoning his mind.
Educating him.
What about our son's welfare?
What about it? I don't think a bunch of women are going to do him any harm.
Well, where do you expect him to sleep?
With us!
You're a mad bitch.
You object to everything I do.
Well, don't you expect me to be here when you come back?
And he wasn't. Blessed relief for her, I always felt.
I suddenly realised that I wanted to go there. Greenham was a women's initiative that reversed traditional roles. It used to be that men left home to go to war, but this time it was women leaving home for peace.
She hadn't planned to go to Greenham. She knew all about it, of course, but she sort of dismissed it as irrelevant. And anyway, she had plenty of reasons not to go. Then one afternoon, she heard a local politician talk on the radio about the Greenham women.
These so-called peace women camping outside Greenham with their ultra-feminist views, their lack of concern for local people, their high-handedness and their public misbehaviour. They have lost any support they ever enjoyed. They have become an unmitigated and expensive nuisance, and we want them to go. What is more, their demonstrations are tying up important police manpower.
If the politicians think that the women at Greenham are a nuisance, then that sounds like the kind of place I should be.
A few days later, Ray went along to Swarthmore for one of their regular monthly meetings, and she heard a young woman speak about her recent visit to Greenham.
She was only my age, had a young son just like me. She was very quietly spoken, and it was difficult to hear what she was saying at times. But I listened to her explain why she felt she had to go, about her fears, her anxieties, and her hopes.
I was at Greenham on Hiroshima Day, 6th of August, last year. 100,000 people were killed at Hiroshima in just a few minutes. So we set out to collect 100,000 stones to be placed on the Newbury War Memorial. I will never forget that experience. The shape, the texture, the coldness of those stones. It was so damn real. It turned my guts upside down. Picking up those stones and putting them on the concrete steps of the memorial, which said, for the glory of the dead. That made more sense to me than most things I've done in my life.
But there was a feeling growing inside her, a kind of spirit flowing through her veins, flowing through her whole body. And it drowned out all those silly thoughts. She knew she had to go, So she went for 1,000 different reasons.
For the earth, for our children, for peace. I knew that nuclear war was wrong, and this was my chance to say no.
She didn't stay long, a week, maybe 2. But when she returned to Plymouth, she felt clearer about her future actions. Greenham women had brought the nuclear issue into everyone's front room.
I left Greenham feeling totally drained, but totally possessed by its spirit. I understood how the power of women could change the world, together, to stand strong, to overcome all those lies and violence. I was done with leafleting and persuading. They won't get us anywhere. Direct action was required now to secure world peace.
Part 2. Planning your survival kit. In the event of a nuclear war,
You need to start assembling your survival kit immediately.
you will need enough water for the family for 14 days?
You are unlikely to be able to use the mains water supply after an attack, so provide your drinking water beforehand by filling bottles for use in the fallout room.
Store extra water in the bath and in basins.
Anything that has fallout dust on it will be contaminated and dangerous to drink or to eat. You cannot remove radiation from water by boiling it.
Remember to shut all your windows and close your curtains.
And you will need to construct a temporary toilet.
Remove the seat of a chair and place a bucket beneath it. You can kiss your ass goodbye. Oh, and if you're not at home during a nuclear attack, lie in a ditch and cover your head with your hands. Ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah, totally.
Your mum and dad used to spend Saturdays in Plymouth city centre.
Yes, I remember handing out leaflets, talking to people about national and local issues. I know because I was often with them, listening to the abuse they would get when they tried to hand out a leaflet. I remember thinking to myself, why do they do this?
Would you be interested in this? It's about a C&D meeting.
Then one particular Saturday I remember, it was raining like it can only do in Plymouth. Horizontal rain that seemed to slice through your whole body. A rain to drown all rains, as Ray Bradbury said.
I was helping Sally because John had been called away on an emergency and Julie was looking after the bookshop.
When a man crossed the street near the market and came right up to Mum and Alison, he spat at them in their faces and yelled, "You filthy dykes, you need a good raping!" I watched my mum and Alison standing together, upright, letting the rain wash off the spit, staring straight at the man. Then in that defiant, dignified silence that followed, the man raised his fist as if he was about to hit them, but instead he swat them again and strode off into the rain. But even that did not stop Mum and Dad. They would be back there the following Saturday, ignoring both the insults and the weather.
You should be ashamed of yourselves. My father gave his life in the war for the likes of you.
Sometimes somebody might stop, look at the leaflet quickly, and then give it back to them without a comment.
Could I interest you in coming to a meeting? It's about nuclear disarmament. It's at the Quaker House.
No chance.
Meeting.
I need to work every hour of the day for me and my wife to survive.
Could you spare a few moments, please? Excuse me? Excuse me?
Then somebody would shout at them from across the road.
What's the point of all that? You should make a protest against the cuts in the social service money. That's more important.
Excuse me, madam.
Excuse me.
Excuse me, would you
But
like...
Mum and Dad will be back there next weekend, week in, week out. Mum told me once.
There's not much else I can do. I'm not brave enough. But I can't just stand by and do nothing. However, I can hold a placard and I can give out leaflets. So that's what I do.
It's on what you remember and the other things that you forget. Mum often spent her evenings, when she wasn't at work, making placards and banners on the dining room table. She was quite arty, I suppose. I remember one particular placard she spent hours on. Keep death off our roads. At the time, I didn't understand the significance of it. I thought it was about safety on the roads and all that, driving carefully, the Green Cross Code. It was only much later that I realised it was about the missile watch and the use of their telephone tree to protest against a secret movement of missiles at night through the towns and villages of Devon and Cornwall.
You know, dear, I'm convinced our telephone has been tapped.
What makes you think that?
I meant to say this to you before, but I'm sure I can hear sort of clicks and whirling sounds every time I pick it up. It sounds very odd. It wasn't there before.
Oh my God. Of course. They realise what we're doing with the tree.
I understand that we should be part of this network. People wouldn't have been able to unite and mount the protest at Marsh Mills. But it's also the line that my patients use after surgery hours.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to involve the surgery in all of this.
It's my first practice, Sally. I think we need to be more careful.
Well, perhaps I'll write to Exeter C&D and ask them for advice.
The other day, I got so fed up with the clicks and whirls that I yelled down the phone, I know you're listening, get off this line! I just hope one of my patients wasn't at the other end.
Your phone probably has been tapped, John, because I'm convinced the bookshop phone has been tapped too.
Really? Mm-hmm. It's all very Orwellian, isn't it?
Big Brother is listening to everything we say.
Do you think that the Russians want war? These are the parents of children who died in the last one. Do you think that it's possible, knowing their past, they'd ever consider repeating the last? When 20 million were slaughtered by Nazi invasion, they died fighting on our side, you know, in a fight to defend all mankind against Nazi terror and hatred.
Well, Ray, shall we tell Mr. Journalist about how you came to leave Plymouth? I think it was after your visit to Greenham when things started to change.
Oh, things started changing well before that. You just didn't notice it. You were too involved in getting the bookshop up and running. We'd been drifting apart for months before that.
After Greenham, you seemed like a different person.
I was a different person. Greenham saved my life. I gave up bothering with men for a start. Lived for politics. And my son Dom, of course. Best decision I ever made.
Do you still think that?
Absolutely.
And you hardly ever came in the bookshop then.
My mind was on other things. Apart from saving the world from nuclear disaster, I needed to sort out the divorce with Dave. And Mum was struggling with depression and she was getting no help. Dad had left her by that time, which was a bonus, waste of space. Anyway, you didn't need me. Oh, your bookshop was flourishing. You've got a gang of regular customers, just what you always dreamed
I
about.
don't know who told you that. It was an endless struggle to keep this place up and running in the early days. Without friends and volunteers, this place would have folded in the first year. We couldn't afford to pay anyone any wages. We were living from hand to mouth and I hated that. Not that you noticed. You weren't even around that day when we were accused by young Tories, hotheads Julie called them, of being in league with the Kremlin.
Who would have thought that the daughter of a vicar would end up running a bookshop, corrupting the minds of the people of Plymouth?
Oh, goodness. Oh, Ray, your sneering tone can be very hurtful. I've learned to live with it. But other people think that you're rude and unpleasant, you know. Anyway, you can mock all you want, but that's something I do thank my father for. Instilling in me the love of literature, the power of the written word. I was never comfortable leading the charge like you, at the head of the march, shouting the slogans. That wasn't me, but I was still doing my bit. We're not that different, the two of us. We just have different ways.
Annie, there's a group of young Tories gathering outside the shop, and one of them is about to make a speech.
Oh?
This bookshop is nothing less than a hotbed of revolution, and there is no place for it in this city. There are books about feminism, homosexuality, and Michael Foot. And I've seen with my own eyes the CND propaganda in this bookshop, that incites rebellion and the overthrow of the law of the land.
No.
This is totally intolerable.
Oh dear.
And who is funding this place? That's what we really want to know. I have it on very good authority that the owners of this bookshop are in league with our enemies and are being funded with rubles from the Kremlin.
Oh, ridiculous.
His words did worry me a bit, you know. But it turned out all right in the end, didn't it?
Lots of people turned up to support us. And those unpleasant young men.
Oh, we didn't expect that, did we?
No, we didn't. Over 60 people came. We sold more books today than we did before Christmas. Some people said they hadn't known about the bookshop before, and now they'll be coming in frequently, especially for the children's section. Yes.
I couldn't believe it, Ali, when you invited those Tories into the bookshop and you gave them tea and biscuits. Do you know some of them bought cards and badges?
Indeed. It all turned out very amicably, I think.
Yes. Ali, John says you're going to stand for the council.
That's right. It's my contribution to the struggle. Local councils are controlled by men, and they never look at issues from a woman's perspective. So I've decided that I'm going to get into the centre of that male-dominated system, on the council, in the various committee meetings. But we have to make our presence felt as a coordinated group of women, so I'm hoping to persuade other women to stand too. Sally?
What?
You? Yes? Yes.
No, I can't.
Yes, you
I can't
can.
stand for the
You
council. I don't think I can do
Yes, you
that.
can. Why not? I'm not exactly charismatic and dynamic.
No, but you're determined. And you're not afraid to make your views known. I'm too timid for that sort of situation. No. Have you talked to Ray about it?
It's none of her business, really. But I know she probably wouldn't approve.
Thinking back now, one of the funniest memories I have of those times was when Mum volunteered Dad to run the creche so that the women could take part in the protest outside Devonport Dockyard. I love my dad, but putting him in charge of 20 toddlers was a bit of a tall order. Dad's biggest problem was recruiting other men to help him. That was quite tricky. He tried to persuade me to help, but luckily I had football.
You want me to do what?
Help me run the creche.
Look, I'm a trained electrician, not a childminder.
Oh, just think of it as a second opportunity, a second career. Anyway, you're good at organising things. Must be all that time you spent in the RAF.
Well, sorting the electrics on a fighter plane I could do with my eyes closed.
I hope not.
But organising a creche? Come on, you're the doctor. You must surely have more experience in that kind of thing.
I'm no expert at dealing with children and babies.
Well, There's been a disaster. My cat's gone missing. About 3 nights ago, I put notices around where we live, but there's been no response. What do you reckon?
I think we need a plan.
A cat plan?
No! A plan with how we're going to take care of 20 children for the whole day.
20? I thought you just meant a handful.
Look, the women need our support at the moment. Open day is coming up at the dockyard and they have something planned for that. It would only be for a few hours.
Well, I leave that kind of thing to my wife. I don't stand in her way.
Yes, but not everybody is that lucky. Some don't have husbands or partners, but they do have young children and babies.
Well, when I was a young lad, I never went to any crash. My mum had to go out to work, so she packed me off with my older brother for a day down at Devil's Point.
Well, we can't do that, can we? So, get your thinking cap on.
So, what do you think about my missing cat?
Oh, look, I'm sorry about your missing cat, but I'm sure she'll turn up. They normally do. The most important pressing thing now is, what are we going to do with 20 kids for the whole day?
Well, I do know some card tricks. They might come in useful.
Oh, God.
I wish I had a photograph of Dad's face when he came to pick me up later. His face was one huge smile after his day in the creche. I think he quite enjoyed himself. Or perhaps it was just sheer relief that he'd managed to get through the day without too many crises. Mum, however, was far from pleased. It seems there had been some sort of incident at the dockyard that afternoon. It was all hushed up, but years later, Dad told me about it.
Well, where is she? Where is Ray now?
She's probably gone back to her place, forgotten all about us. She's like that. She can be careless with other people's feelings.
Well, she needs to grow up then, doesn't she?
You try telling her that.
Well, where is she living now anyway? Is she still in the mum's place?
Yeah, she's
Yes,
still...
she is still living at her mum's place.
Where have you been, Ray? It's gone. 10 o'clock. I was about to lock up. Where have you been all this time? We agreed to meet back here between 5 and 6. So where have you been?
Yes.
Did you get arrested?
We went inside the base.
What?
Jackie and me. We just waltzed in through the main gates.
Who's Jackie?
That student from the Polytechnic. She's studying environmental science. She's all right, her. Full of bright ideas.
But where have you been all this time? It's gone 10.
Well, it was open day, wasn't it? So we just pretended to be locals come to admire all those boys' big toys. They were very friendly and polite to us. You should see what they've got in there behind those walls.
You said that you were going to hand out leaflets outside the dockyard's main gates.
I am sick and tired of leafleting, getting them thrown back in your face with a torrent of abuse. Those days are over for me. It's a waste of time.
Look, we said that we were here to act as witnesses, not provocateurs.
It's all right for the likes of Jackie. She's a student with no ties. She can afford to do those things.
But you've got a young son who depends on you. You have responsibilities, don't you?
I don't need you to lecture me about my responsibilities. I also have a responsibility to use my time to try to stop the world from going up in flames.
How did you manage to evade security?
Oh, don't talk to me about security. When I was at Greenham, we got into the airbase one night and wandered around for hours before we went into the mess kitchen and made ourselves cups of coffee, all without being detected. Eventually, we got bored and came back out.
So, what happened today? Why were you so late? You didn't even pick up Dom from the creche.
Well, they let us wander everywhere. Showed us around one of their submarines. They were very keen to impress us with all their hardware. And And of course we played along with them, smiling and flirting with all these young, impressionable sailors. They weren't that impressed though when we chained ourselves into one of the pipes down below in one of those submarines.
Oh my
that caused quite a ruckus.
That is totally irresponsible of you.
Were you arrested then?
No, shame. We were quite looking forward to making a guest appearance at court.
Oh, no.
They kept us in this really stuffy porter cabin for hours and hours, trying to intimidate us. Then they just released us, escorted us to the gates and told us to go. We expected to be carted off to prison, but nothing. If we'd been charged, then it would have been in the papers, been embarrassing for them, so presumably they want it all hushed up.
You can't carry on like this.
We don't agree with what you're doing. This sort of thing will only alienate people against us. We need to win them over with our arguments. The facts.
You're wrong. The general public don't give a toss. Direct action has got to be the way forward. It's got to be targeted and well planned. We knew what we were doing this afternoon. We had it all planned.
Oh.
That's the way forward.
But you never told us what you were going to do.
I knew what you would say.
Ray, you can't afford to be doing these sorts of things. Can you?
Well, I've just done it.
But what about your son? What about Dom? Have you taken him into consideration at all?
What a laugh! That was all I could think about while they had us incarcerated into that porter cabin for hours on end. Dom was meant to be staying with his dad at the weekend. I'd agreed with Mum to help paint her kitchen. She'd just moved into a new flat and she wanted me to help her with a new fridge. I should also be planting my lettuce seeds. All of these things were on my mind, and I said to myself, none of these things should matter to me, not in the grand scale of things, not compared to the horrors of nuclear destruction and the devastation of our planet. But I'm sorry, they did matter to me. I spent most of my time stuck in that smelly porter cabin worrying about my son, worrying about what my mum might say.
So what happened about Dom?
Well, luckily, that young fellow with the missing cat, he knows Ray's mum. So he took Dom over there.
Oh, right.
Well, that sorts that out then, doesn't it?
Yes.
Part 3. What to do on hearing the fallout warning. In the event of a nuclear war,
Stay inside your fallout room, keeping the radio tuned for government advice and instructions.
the dangers will be so intense that you may need to stay there for at least 48 hours.
And remember, you will need to listen to your radio for instructions about what to do after the attack.
After 48 hours, the danger from the fallout will lessen.
But the longer you spend in your refuge, the better.
When you hear the all clear, this means there is no longer any immediate danger and you may resume your normal activities.
Oh, dear.
Western Evening Herald, Tuesday 24th of May 1983. That was the day of peace and disarmament for women, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. There were protests all around Europe that day, so we needed to show solidarity with women across the world. We needed to do something that would get us into the newspapers, on Spotlight, something eye-catching and symbolic.
Linking arms across the Tamar Bridge. That sounds like a good idea to me. problem is, where do we get all the women to do that? It would take hundreds of us to reach right across the bridge from one end to the other.
Well, there are plenty of local peace groups. You could ask them to come and join you.
That's a good idea.
Ashburton have got a peace group.
I know someone in the Totnes Women's Peace Movement.
There's a group at Tavistock as well.
So invite them to join us. Southwest Women for Peace. We'll all meet in the morning at the Plymouth Arts Centre for breakfast.
Free breakfast. Yes,
Sounds good.
linking arms across the Tamar Bridge is pathetic. Is that it? Is that all we're doing? It's not worth the effort. Nobody will take any notice of us. They'll dismiss us as mad bitches. No, we need to do something stronger, something more provocative, not this passive resistance lark.
What
Do you
are you suggesting we do?
Stick 2 fingers up at them, metaphorically.
How do you intend to do that?
We've spent too long having meeting after meeting, leafleting people on Saturdays in the city centre, standing around with placards. And where has it got us? Nowhere.
So what do you want to do then, Ray?
We've got to cause some chaos, stop the traffic for a start, put our bodies on the line, lie down in the middle of the road, in the middle of the bridge, bring the whole bloody thing to a screeching halt. All of us. Upset people, then they might take us seriously.
We can't do that, Ray. We're expecting hundreds to turn up at the bridge today. Women, children, old women, toddlers, babies from all over Plymouth and Devon and Cornwall. They're not prepared to do that.
We said a peaceful protest. That's what we agreed. We can't take that risk.
That's what you agreed.
Can you imagine what the newspapers would say about us? They're not friendly at the best of times.
So you think provoking people is going to further world peace?
We've got to be more direct. Make them realise we're deadly serious.
You're wrong, Ray. These kind of demonstrations do make a difference. They're all part of a worldwide day of protest.
They'll just drive by and they will have forgotten about us by the time they reach the top of the next hill. Look at all those pathetic women. They should get back home, look after their kids, make their dinners husbands. Ooh, that's what they'll say. I'm sick of it.
Ray, just listen to me for once. I know you think I'm a bit wishy-washy, too careful, too worried about what other people might think, but that all changed when I joined McCamway. Because there can be no effective medical response to nuclear war. Treatment, not trident. That's our stance. I'm sure you know that the cost of one trident would fund a very effective NHS, but it is not always plain sailing. The NHS sometimes are against us. They accuse us of quack criminology, but we don't shout them down. There's no point in meeting aggression with aggression. We are trying to persuade them to join our peace conference in Moscow. So, don't you see, Ray? We have to unite to work for a just and peaceful world.
And you honestly believe that, John? You are naive for an educated, privileged man. A just and peaceful world. Peace is not possible in a world riddled with inequalities and dominated by patriarchy and power.
Ray, you are blinded by anger. I'm sure Sally will agree that I was never one for joining organisations, but never naive. You belittled organisations like McCamway, but that's what drew me to the Quakers.
Oh, John!
Oh, don't scoff, Ray. The Quakers' lack of dogma, their constant searching, their worldview that we must all be active witnesses. Come on, Ray. You can't disagree with all that. Do you know what the Moscow proposal has resulted in?
I've set up a pen friend scheme between children in Moscow and children in Plymouth.
If we can get the children realising their common humanity, then surely we can't fail.
Oh, John! Do you really believe the world powers are going to crumble in the face of some children singing sweetly together? I'm sorry, but from where I'm standing right now, it's deeds and not words. All power to that suffragette, Emily Davidson. She died for her cause. You can count me out of this pathetic bridge protest. I'm not taking any part in it.
That was the last we saw of Ray.
Hearing Alison and Ray recalling the protest on the bridge all those years ago jogged a memory for me. I was there too, on the bridge that day with Mum and Alison. I held their hands. Dad was running the creche, of course. He was an expert on that now. I've been given the choice, the creche or the bridge. I was so glad that I chose the bridge. They nearly did it, those women. They nearly spanned the length of the bridge. But all the press could say was they were a few women short.
Yeah, we've got it in an article here in our thing. The Western Evening Herald on Tuesday the 24th of May 1983. 400 women protesters failed to link Devon and Cornwall in a human chain across the Tamar Bridge.
Typical they focused on that. I bet it was a man that wrote that.
Can't be bothered to celebrate the fact that we managed to get 400 women to that bridge on the 24th of May. No, they have to report the fact that we were a few women short.
I remember Mum and Dad being more upset about the fact that Ray didn't turn up that afternoon.
I thought about Ray that afternoon as we linked arms across the bridge, and I wondered where she might be. It didn't cross my mind that she'd really gone, packed her stuff and skedaddled.
I do regret not being with you all on the bridge on that 24th of May, but that's me all over, I know. I knew I'd messed it up within days of leaving Plymouth, but I couldn't come back. Then, a few weeks later, with Thatcher's victory in the national elections, it seemed like the country was going up in flames.
We all hoped that you would join us on our Land's End Green and Walk the following year.
We look for you at each stop. Red Ruth, Truro, here in Plymouth, Totnes and at Exeter. By the time we reached Frome, we knew that you wouldn't be coming.
But I did come back to Plymouth once or twice just to see my mum. Only stayed for a day or two, then retreated back to Manchester. Couldn't face meeting with people, with you again.
You'll miss your train if you're not careful.
Well, perhaps I should miss it.
He didn't like my article about the bookshop, the editor. He said it lacked human interest, so it never got published. I thought it was rather good, but who am I to say? However, listening to Alison Ray recall the peace movement in the 1980s has helped me remember and celebrate my mother. She died suddenly in 1999, the year of the total eclipse. My dad never got over that. his life fell apart and he just shut down. Sits there every day staring out the window, remembering friends whom he never may meet again, as Coleridge said. Perhaps if I can get all this material together and read it to him, it might prompt him to communicate again. Alison and Ray gave me an old newspaper cutting about Martha the Peace Dragon to show Dad. They said I was in the photo, but all I could see was my skinny legs in rather embarrassing shorts. Mum and Dad helped to make Martha. She was 21 feet long, like a Chinese paper dragon. We paraded her from Mutley Plain to the Barbican. It was July and hot, a few months after the Tamar Bridge. Dad promised me an ice cream. I got one with 2 chocolate flakes. I remember now, looking at a press photo, that lots of people smiled and nodded at us, and Mum was happy. And she said,
That's a start at least. Perhaps they will start to listen to us now.
there's a photo here too, of me and Mum at Greenham. She took me there during the summer holidays.
Butlins under canvas.
Dad joined us at the weekends and took charge of the creche. The little kids loved him. Mum would come home even more determined to do her bit, as she put it. I asked her why.
I have no choice, do I? I have to do something. I can't be a bystander.
Then she would ruffle my hair and tell me about the time we'd having lit candles at the ruins of Charles Church for Hiroshima Day. She had to leg it over the wall and run across the busy roundabout because someone had phoned the vicar and he'd accused her of trespassing.
Yes, and in my panic, I lost a shoe and I had to hop it all the way home.
I remember that.
But, despite all these efforts, in November 1983, the first of the cruise missiles finally arrived at Greenham. So was it worth it? Was it worth all the struggle?
Yeah.
Yes, you've got to believe that. I've got to believe that.
You need to remember, Mr. Journalist, by August 1989, only 6 years later, the cruise missiles started to leave Greenham.
And by 1992, they had all gone.
Yes.
So, perhaps we can say that we all contributed to that.
Definitely.
So a victory then.
Yes.
Yes.
Mum died believing that. But now, as Shakespeare said, still in your right hand, carry gentle peace to silence envious tongues.
Exactly. We can't afford to stop our protests when there are still so many weapons in the world.
Nothing less than the dismantling of the whole military machine will satisfy us.
They're still squandering our taxes on weapons of mass destruction, even today.
We mustn't end up like Jim and Hilda in When the Wind Blows.
Morning, love. Oh, how do you feel?
I ache all over.
So do I, love. Never mind. It's probably the bomb. It's bound to upset us a bit. We don't have to worry though, because the powers that be will get to us soon.
I must clear up. Suppose someone should see all this mess.
The emergency service should arrive any minute. There'll be soup kitchens and teams of doctors flying in and nurses and medical supplies.
I hope they come soon, because I'm not feeling very well. My legs are covered in sores.
Oh, don't worry, love. I'll pop down to the chemist when this all blows over.
Oh, let's take a walk in the garden, dear. Fresh air is all we need.
The milkman's not been yet, love.
Oh, well, he's bound to be a bit late after the ball.
When the doctor gets here, he'll probably just give us a couple of pills and in no time we'll be Right
In
as
the event
right.
Oh, I hope
Nuclear
so,
war.
dear. I don't
In
feel
the
very
event
well.
of a nuclear war.
Maybe
In the event
we better
of
put
a
them
nuclear
brown paper bags
In the
over our
event
heads
of
again,
a nuclear
like
war.
what we was told to
In
do.
the event
All
of a
right,
nuclear
love.
war.
Although
In the event
I'm not sure
of a
that the
nuclear
powers
war.
that be have
In the
got
event
this all
of a
right.
nuclear war.
In the event of a nuclear war.
In
In the event of a nuclear war.
Women of the world, take over. Because if you don't, the world will come to an end. And we haven't got long. Women of the world, take over. Because if you don't, the world will come to an end, and we haven't got long. Men have had their shot, and look at where we've got. Women of the world, take over. Because if you don't,
Thank you very much for being an incredible audience this afternoon, this evening. We really appreciate you coming in. We can tell you're engaged and you've been listening very well. Thank you very much. Just one little thing. If you could leave some donations behind, that'd be really appreciated. Half of the donations is shared with the library towards their favourite causes, so please be generous for us. Thank you ever so much for coming, and we really appreciate if you would come again to any of our performances in this beautiful central library. Thank you very much for being here.